I think give us a minute or two, we'll just get started.
Yeah, sure.
Thanks, Ravindra and Gagan, for joining us. I think we're just waiting for a couple of folks to join.
Sure.
Sure.
So, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to this webinar where we're looking to explore, the latest RBI master direction on payment aggregators. My name is Malcolm. I'm the Chief Operating Officer at Identify. I'm the Chief Operating Officer at Identify. Identify is we like to call ourselves as the trust stack leaders. We work with several payment sort of leading players in that space, both acquirers, issuers, and and in that context, we thought we should sort of have this conversation to table some of the key points that we want to debate in this space, right? So I'd like to perhaps then just generally the theme of the webinar is to the guidelines here. It's been a 4 weeks, few weeks. I'm sure several of you have already gone through this. So I think we want to explore the next order set of things, and we'll cover a few themes as we go along that I'll introduce. But before that, I'll perhaps request our panelists and the great sort of the people we managed to get together to introduce themselves. So Ravindra will perhaps start with you. After that, Gagan, and maybe then Saharsh to round us up, and then I'll take it from there.
Yeah, sure. Just wanted to check my voice is loud and clear.
Yeah, we can
Yeah,
hear you.
great. First of all, thanks for having this webinar, Malcolm, Sarsh. Well, I am Ravindra. I am from Amazon Pay. I look after the payment experience and merchant expansion at Amazon Pay. Been into this industry of entire merchant acquiring for last 8 years, 5 years with Amazon Pay, and prior to that at PayU, I was managing the SMB's business as well. Uh, yeah, very much looking forward to this webinar. I think the guidelines have come very loud and clear, pinpointed. So, looking forward to deep dive on a couple of areas on how it's going to impact the industry, how it going to impact all of us, uh, with all of you.
Yeah, Gagan, please.
First of all, yeah, thanks for having us. Uh, I am Gagan. I look at the regulated businesses and PA and PPI businesses at Tata Payments. Also, we power out the checkout experience for larger Tata Group with multiple brands right across from Big Basket to Chroma and IHCL to multiple others. Prior to this, I've been with Paytm and BharatPay, but have spent last 5 years on the acquiring side. So that way, I'm looking forward to this discussion and how things have evolved from unregulated space to actually now being guided by all the regulations.
Thank you, Gagan. Saharsh, very quickly.
Yes, hi everyone. My name is Saharsh. I handle the enterprise business at Identify, leading the PAPG vertical. The last few years, I've seen the PAPG vertical closely in onboarding and servicing, I think, most of the players in the industry. So happy to join this discussion and bring my perspectives.
No, thank you. I think we'll get started. As you mentioned at the start, I think these guidelines have been awaited for a while. They're finally here, and I think, like I said, everybody's read through it, and I'm sure gone through it. So we want to explore sort of maybe some of the next level sort of things. So we'll sort of run this webinar in three portions. One, we'll talk about the implications of the regulations, compliance, and regulatory readiness. Secondly, the second theme we'll explore is just onboarding journeys, implications. How does that change? And then lastly, we look to explore onboarding is of course just the start of a relationship with a merchant, right? Or partners in the ecosystem. So we'd want to explore what beyond onboarding, right? What's the on ground impact of some of these. So that's largely the flow of this webinar. So, but before we dive into each of these themes, maybe we'll do a quick round robin with all three panelists, right? And again, we'll probably go in the same order: Ravindra with you, Gagan, and then Saharsh. So if you have to take one just one takeaway, your sort of biggest takeaway, or sort of implication for you that's coming out of these regulations, what would it be? And maybe just pick one, and probably the same question for the other two folks as well. But Ravindra, starting with you.
I think the biggest takeaway would be that now the guidelines are super clear. And as much as PAs wanted that the KYCs of banks shall be leveraged, that's not the guideline has come out to be. Like PAs have to do a lot of heavy lifting. Um, so there is a lot to be weighed in by PAs to make the business happen, grow the business, sustain the business. And I believe at the end of the day, it shall end up translating to how will PAs end up making money in the long run as well. So that would be my biggest takeaway as a PA. But this kind of completely curtails uh, in terms of fraud risk, becomes very stringent, very high bar our Reserve Bank has kept for doing the payment business in India.
Correct. Gagan, your
So
thoughts?
I think we have seen the last in like decade back when it started more as a wild west, where we were just acquiring customers across right, left, right, center, and driving the digital adoption. But now I think we have overall as industry has matured. I think the guideline provides a clear-cut framework on how we can operate in, and I think it's very much clear and codified in sense of how it unifies across online, physical, and cross-border. So I think that clarity of thought and structure gives out more of to industry as well, how they can align on those businesses and how they can play. And as the industry is mature, I think this will help us a lot in making it the system more stable and trustworthy for all the participants involved. I think that's what is more critical. And I think as we see the growth, there are abuses also which happens along with it.
True.
Now with focus on KYC, I think we'll see a lot more like you can say cleansing of part of the system which has happened maybe inadvertently in part of growth. Those things would go away, and then we'll just evolve how industry learns from it as it matures. So I think
Got
right from a child, we have matured enough to become more like
it.
graduated as an industry, and that's where it is going.
Got it. Sarge, your view, your top sort of takeaway.
Yes, I think my top takeaways, I'm seeing it from a draft guideline point of view as well. So my top takeaway is the partnership that has come in. The industry bodies and the players have made a representation to RBI, and from what we saw in draft guidelines to what we are seeing here, I think it's clearly emerging that those feedbacks have been taken and things have been turned quite business friendly as if we compare from draft guidelines. So I think the entire ecosystem is emerging. The regulator, the bodies, and the PA players are a part of it and operating together to make the system more streamlined. That's how I see these guidelines.
Got it. No, great, wonderful. I think thanks for sharing those thoughts. I think we'll dive into our sort of first segment, which, like I said, is just looking at gun to touch upon that. So maybe I'll start with both Ravindra and Gagan. Both of you have seen the industry, as you said, put it very nicely. Gagan, from a child who's now walking and running as an adult in some ways, right? So since 2016, as there have been multiple ups and downs, right? GST, demon, then as in the last sort of 12 18 months, there's more sort of regulatory involvement, and now obviously these guidelines, right? So I think you've seen this journey, and therefore we wanted to sort of get your little bit of this longitudinal view. So maybe Ravindra, I'll start with you
Mhm.
on this on sort of with this perspective. So from the point of view of what is the intent of the regulator, the reception in the industry, and the macro impact of these guidelines, what is sort of your take on these?
So, well, basically, you're asking three point of views: intent of regulator, reception, and the macro impact. Like coming to the intent of the regulator, it has always been keeping a high bar in terms of uh, how FIUs have been seeing at this industry and minimizing the risk that ends up happening in terms of money laundering, etc. Probably going back a few weeks back, the entire real money gaming industry ban was also very much motivated from this on what kind of money laundering might be happening behind the curtains, etc. While on the larger narrative, it was also impacting the people in the strata of society, but the other motive was also about this. So keeping a very tight control on how the money movement happens, knowing precisely who is accepting who, what kind of money, is where intent of the regulator has always been. And I think with this master direction, it has been very, very clear that every single merchant needs to go through a comprehensive KYC or KYB, however we want to call it, be it in terms of having the VCIP, like thorough video KYC, or like having a digital checks by in person, the staff going, or the feet on street agent visiting the merchant, and then also leveraging the central KYC registry database as well. So combination of all of this is creating a very, very stringent KYC bar, and we can go into specifics on how exactly these have been laid out as well. I'm sure the master guideline is also clearly laying them out, but that's where it is, like knowing precisely each and every merchant separately, like further tightening the guardrail by being very specific in terms of the capturing the MCC of the merchant as well, versus vis-a-vis like merchants having self-declaration. Now the RBI is saying that PAs are responsible for the MCC accuracy. So these are big shifts which are happening. And I think a lot of responsibility and onus has been completely put on the PAs. How does this translates to the actual, like coming to the second point, that reception in the industry? I'm sure like all the PAs will have a lot more stake in the business, but at the same time this is a huge amount of cost. While meeting 1st January guideline might be relatively easier because it's all about the new merchant, but like re-KYC of all your existing merchants by by September 26, 2026 is a large ask. Someone needs to chew all of these costs which are going to come in place, and with that, I believe like VCIP is going to play a very, very big role in this context as well, because it will obviously come at a far lower cost compared to the physical KYC. That's one for the large merchants, and I think for the small merchants also, having less than 40 lakhs of turnover, I think taking the PAN and doing the CPV, that has also been very simplified, and it kind of, while RBI has like said that offline business will has kind of has regulated the PAP business, but at the same time has kept the life simple for the small businesses as well, so that it doesn't impacts the MSME industry in a negative manner. So that's where it is. Like macro impact will be that large businesses have to be go through far more scrutiny, and MSMEs shall continue to thrive in this country because that's the backbone which is going to drive the growth in future as well.
Got it. No, thanks for breaking that down for us, Ravindra. Maybe I'll turn to you, Gagan. I think you mentioned it as well. You've seen how this ecosystem has evolved as a sort of key sort of pillar of formalization and kind of backbone of the economy. Now, of course, I know Ravindra talked about there's obviously a lot of onus on PAs. There's going to be compliance costs, etc. But do you think, in some sense, there's also something to be gained out of this, right? Meaning both PAs, both online, offline. Is there an opportunity to deliver, let's say, unified experience, or are the other sort of benefits you think that could come out of this for the PAs themselves, as well as perhaps even the broader ecosystem?
Yeah, I think regulations are now first come down and more at a larger ecosystem, while individual players will have to find ways to for their value in it. But if I see from for larger ecosystem, whatever if all the regulations, if you see in past 1 year, as Ravindra was mentioned, it's more about knowing where the money flow is happening and to who, from who is the originator and who is the receiver. Let's say even when we say card to cash, what was happening, or when we say rent payment, which was happening, all those have been in a way like moved away from, because we don't know the ultimate beneficiary who is receiving the money. So the regulation has always been around how the money flow is, so that we can track it, and there is no money laundering involved. So I think what you mentioned even on gaming as well, that is where it was going into. like how is there any money laundering involved there. So regulations wise, I think that is right, and eventually it will help overall ecosystem to weed out and handle the risk of money movement better, or for like whatever the implications, like maybe short term you don't see those uh, effect on the businesses, and one will see just a cost, but long term it would have a result on even individual players on lower risk when you know who is the entity which is involved in the transaction. So that way it reduces the risk. But I think the bigger challenge though for the industry would be, like, I think online space is pretty much still very much more tech savvy, and where I think PA Onlines have anyways been for last 2 years, they have been working towards onboarding KYC and all those aspects of it. While for offline, I believe the stacks would be available, but for lower merchant, if you go to a shop owner is still low. But now in India, if you say ready wala, if you say like, or a moving truck also has a QR code, how do you ensure KYC is done for that guy in the right manner and in the simulated time that regulator is seeking for? That becomes a challenge. And bigger challenge on the onus which is coming on a PA would be on MCC for it. I have seen in the past, like whatever you do for online businesses, it is very easy to say this is a marketplace, or this is a selling jewelry shop, or it is how it is. But for smaller businesses, classification becomes an issue, and the agent at the ground, he tends to pick up the first option which is available. So correction of those will take a lot of time for each company to ensure that they are able to use AI/ML models to just identify who is the right correction which has to be done in, and how do you ensure that those are captured rightly. Though it will have a larger implication on the ecosystem from a regulator standpoint, where we know how is the penetration. There would be good data insights for us all to later on after this to come out and then say this is the grocery penetration versus pharmacy, how it is happening right now. And NPCI has also started publishing on MCC wise data. So those research would help us. Like, I think a lot more insights can be drawn by industry maybe post September 26. But till that point of time, a lot more investments will have to go in, and somewhere businesses will have to take that one time hit to align with this and maybe reap and benefit later on.
Got it.
That's where I think it's going to be a challenging aspect for the upfront cost.
Understood. So yes, I
Yeah.
think you've summarized it very well to say there is an upfront cost, pain, effort to be put in, but I think there are clear benefits in the long term in terms, like you're saying, in terms of risk, probably better profiling, better insights, and so on and so forth. And I assume over time, lesser fraud and things of that sort, right? So, no, thank you for clarifying
I
that.
just wanted to add one
Yeah,
point
please,
on
please.
top of what Gagan said. Uh, the cost is upfront there, but I think like today, at least at the small merchants, we say that there are multiple QRs. Like there are five offline players and merchant has like all those five QRs. I think now a point will come when merchant is going to say, boss, like, no, I want to consolidate my relationship. I don't want to go through my KYC 5 times, because at least that's what the guideline is about, right? And so it's also an opportune moment for players who are operating at large scale in terms of a land grab, probably. But of course, that land grab is going to come at a very high cost in terms of upfront investing a lot of effort in terms of doing the CPV specifically for these merchants.
Yeah. I
Got
think
it.
hopefully everybody will find some lending model around it to maybe in a way cross sell other services with this KYC, and do not just limit it to min KYC, and do full KYB part of it with even with the smaller merchants to upsell for lending or any other financial product they want to sell in. I think that's how most of the players maybe will eventually end up positioning it,
Yeah.
and incentivize customers also to do it, because it's seen in the past customers also would not have otherwise incentive right now, till the point you, like you say that okay, you cannot use the QR code anymore or the payment method
True,
anymore.
true, true.
So that gamification of it will have to happen in some way for actually to see even merchant to also see value in it.
Got it. No, great. Thank you for both of you for sharing that. Sarge, I'll turn over to you. Perhaps I think since this over, obviously, you continuously, I'm sure, speak to a lot of PAs and players in this ecosystem, and then obviously, I would say more so in the last 30 days. So, how are you seeing people getting ready to adopt to these changes, especially given the first Jan timeline?
Yes.
So, Malcolm, the timelines are seeing in two ways: first Jan and the next year September 1. I think first Jan, what I'm seeing is most of the people are largely comfortable with first Jan timeline. While PA online PAs, the PAOs did get a heads up in terms of what kind of KYC regulations are coming in. PAPs are something that the physical PAs are getting to know about it now. But I
Mhm.
think most of the industry, as Ravindra and Gagan said, that they are adopting a VSIP first approach. They are finding that to be the easiest mode to reach the merchant, deploy VSIP, and get it started, get the KYC done very quickly possible. I think another interesting thing that I'm seeing the larger PAs do is this is an interaction that they're doing with the merchant, and they're not restricting it just to KYC. They're using this same tool, same platform to do things like affluent checks on the merchant, do things like what are the other upsell products that can be sold from the PA to the merchant, and capture those kind of information on a dynamic level as well. So people are thinking in that direction. So 1st January, I think coming back to the point that 1st January looks achievable from a fresh merchant point of view. September is something. Next year, September is something which is huge, and everyone is right now. Though right now everyone is worried, people are first. What I see from here is people are looking to sort out the fresh onboarding till January. But then yes, September is something that is coming next year, and everybody is kind of worried on how to clear the long tail of dormant merchants, inactive merchants. As Gagan said, the inaccuracies of MCC which have been there for a few months and years in the system. How to weed that out? That is something that the industry is worried about at the back of the mind.
Got it. No, thanks for sharing that, Search. I think we'll kind of change track a little bit now and
Yeah.
explore number two. I think we spent some time to understand the broader perspective, thanks to this conversation. So maybe now focusing specifically on the onboarding journey and sort of what changes there, right? So Gagan, maybe I'll start with you, and maybe like I said, I think this journey has evolved. It is where it is today, but now that these master directions are in place, how do you see the onboarding journey changing?
So I think good part is some of the players are selling other financial products, so they have some part of KYC journeys created. I think now it's just now they're gonna surface bubble up at the time of onboarding itself, rather than for upselling at a later stage. So that is where it
True.
is gonna come in mandatorily, and that is gonna help a lot of players to adjust directly for that part of regulation from day zero. So that's where it was gonna help a lot, and especially with min KYC guidelines for less than 40 lakhs income group, just with PAN and POI and POA, that is something which is minimalistic in approach, and people can actually work around for that part of things. I think the challenge is going to be more around how do we onboard for larger players, or the segments which are maybe a long tail where they might need assisted onboarding. That is something which is going to be critical in how do we integrate more of some of the customers who are still on, maybe not on smartphones. How do we cater to them, and or maybe in a long term which are like still work not so digitally savvy, how do you cater to them as a digital onboarding? That is where it is going to be mix of self in the apps where, but lot more push is going to happen in tier 3 tier 4 around assisted onboarding. That is where we'll have to see how agents will play a role in actually getting the right customer, and how do you blend that piece to ensure customer consent is also captured while being assisted. That's something which is going to be tricky, but I think players have seen it along, so hopefully they'll be able to find the right balance of trust and convenience.
Got it. So you're saying that while these players may not be doing today, I think these components exist around them in the ecosystem. Obviously, they need to be pulled together and sort of integrate. No, thank you, Gagan. I think that clarifies. Ravina, I think maybe to you, there is clearly a nudge for CKYC, etc., being used. How do you see that being, you know, translated into actual implementation? Is it a optional thing versus other KYCs? Is this the primary de facto
Mm.
approach? Is how you think look at it, and then sort of what challenges or opportunities you foresee here?
Yeah, interesting question. Um, so first of all, like the way we see today how CKYCR database exists, at least as far as my understanding goes, uh, there is the database makes sense to some level for the entities in terms of uh, the availability of data, in terms of the what kind of quality of the data is. But obviously, the availability, like selection, coverage of the database and the quality metrics are not publicly available, so we exactly don't know where we are. But for individuals, as we understand, the data quality is not in that great shape as of now. Of course, but since 2021, the banks have the mandate that they need to keep uploading the data in terms of whatever KYCs they have been doing. But we need to understand exactly when we are going to assess this database, we need to understand like what kind of quality is going to emerge out of this. But all in all, my overall take is that as of now, at least for next 12-month kind of a time window, the CKYC data is not going to be that helpful, and every PA will have to kind of rely a lot on pursuing their own KYCs, video KYCs as well, while the re-upload will keep on happening and the database will keep on getting enriched over a period of time. Uh, but yeah, that's the primary take, the way it looks like. I think once that this data becomes more robust and mature, then probably to simplify the entire KYC operations, again, in the master directions, if RBI can consider the inheritance, like the way it happens in the mutual fund industry as well, that if I have done my KYC once, I can inherit that KYC for the other mutual funds. I think that kind of a mandate, if it comes in future, then I think there will be a real leverage and like things can become very simplified. Today it's like, as of today it's at best like I don't need to upload as a merchant, I don't need to upload my document, just that it will be fetched from a database. But once it is fetched, I still need to verify it, I still need to say that yes, this document makes sense, and if there is some update, like as a PI, I need to send it back to the CKYCR. So those things are there, so it reduces friction slightly, but the real challenge of doing the entire KYC, not the challenge, but the process is not like simplifies a lot, is where we are. Maybe you can also chime in, and Gagan can also chime in whether this understanding is correct or not. But that's what we are reading it as, that only after a period of 12 to 18 months we'll start seeing the leverage. And of course, inheritance is a big, uh, can play a big role, but it is not there in the master directions as of today.
Got it. Gagan, any thoughts, quick thoughts on that if you want to add on? Would you agree? Or?
Yeah, I think you made a really good point. I think CKYC being available is interesting, but it is not taking away the friction. It
True.
would have been much more easier. Let's say if I say more of Aadhaar validation, how we do. I send out an OTP and then it just KYC is done. I don't have to re-upload those kind of documents. So that is something which is maybe hopefully in future that will come out. But data quality and reliability of CKYC, that is going to be a something which is outside the control of PS, but is critical for a smooth onboarding.
True.
That is going to be much more something to like a single point of failure, you can say in some ways, which will come in. And also it might, if the issues are with the reliability of CKYC, which I have seen in the past, you might have to see multiple KYC attempts that players will have to do. That is something we'll have to look out for. Second, I think is around how do we handle for high risk KYC merchants. Even if it comes down, how do we do smart maybe segmentation to ensure like enhanced due diligence? All those parameters will also have to flow in at real time. If I'm, let's say, more for physical one where it's somebody's at the doorstep or the agent is trying to close in, how do we close on that activity? And that's where reliability of CKYC becomes much more critical. And along with it, smart segmentation will have to be done real time basis. Those two elements are going to drive overall onboarding experience with CKYC.
Interesting. No, I think both of you, I think this has been, as you can imagine, there's some questions on the chat also about this. So I
Yeah.
think you've touched upon a lot of it. But but great. No, thank you for clarifying. I think, like you're saying, it's not an immediate absolute solution, but over time it could hold promise. I think some of the question on data quality etc. still need to get resolved. So no, segment of our sort of a discussion, which is around. I think we talked a lot about onboarding, but the business is much more than just onboarding the merchant. That's where in some ways the relationship starts, right? But over time, you want to build a longer term sort of connect with merchants and engage and so on and so forth. So I think that's what we're going to talk about. What beyond onboarding and what some of the on ground impact. So Ravindra, I'll start with you here. So I think you touched upon it in your earlier opening as well. Accurate MCC identification, and that has to
Yeah,
be done by the PA now.
yeah.
But from a PA and an ecosystem standpoint, why is this important? And secondly, maybe the link question is, it's obviously, in some cases you can argue it's easy, and in some cases argue it's complex, right?
Mhm,
Especially where lines of business get blurred. So, how do you think tech innovation can sort of help support this in some sense?
mhm, mhm. Well, maybe I'll touch the first question on why it is important. I think in terms of importance, like kinds of MCCs, etc. Right. So from those point of views, having far more accuracy, and of course money laundering and how FIUs assess every transaction pattern, all those things, MCC accurate MCC identification becomes very very important. And I think if we are able to achieve greater heights in accuracy, far more simplification the end consumer can be built basis the MCC itself. That's where we are today. Um, in terms of the overall leverage that we can build via tech, I think there's a lot to be done. Um, like uh, to begin with, like PAs being able to scrape websites, identifying what kind of MCCs, like this is the lowest hanging fruit, which is already in progress, happening already. Then further looking at the picture on the signboard, I think Identify has also kind of those kind of solutions as well, like doing the capturing the pictures and depicting the MCCs. Further, probably, and of course, then there's a sync. I think GST has this HSN number with which you're able to sync and map the MCCs. Those things are also there. Um, but I think, like, even in terms of assessing the kind of transactions that are happening at the merchant, mapping it with the broader MCC groups, doing those data analysis patterns, in those sense also AI can play a kind of a good role where how the transactions are varying, how the limits are varying, and whether it is matching with the MCC that was identified at the time of merchant onboarding or not. Like there can be recurring monitoring on that terms, and technology can play a large role in terms of reducing the cost of all this identification and saying that high MCC accuracy is being maintained or not. So that's where we are. I think probably what would be helpful, maybe if I can take a lead, like define an industry standard metric on how accurate is your MCC like. So for a portfolio of merchants and say that, okay, this is the framework which basis which the accuracy metric is being defined, and like how a specific PS merchants are stack ranking. So those kind of solutions can also be built, because once we quantify it, then chasing the gaps becomes far more easier as well. So yeah, that would be the take in terms of what all can be done with the help of technology.
No, thanks, Ravindra. We'll make a note of that for our own product thinking. No, thank you for that. But maybe Gagan, slightly different piece we wanted to explore. I think, and I read the when I read the master directions as well, it had this background and antecedent checks, right? And at least I felt that was a little. I mean, I was not fully clear. So maybe we are going to give you this. Like, how do you interpret it, and what measures? I'm not specifically you, but what measures you hear people taking, and at what frequency to do this. So, one, what is it exactly? How do I interpret it? And then, what are people doing about it? What frequency, etc. Would be good if you can share your thoughts. And Ravindra, if you want to add at the back end of Gagan's response, please feel free to.
Yeah, sure.
Welcome, I just lost you in between. If you could just highlight the part of master direction, what area that you were
No, no.
referring
So
to.
I'll repeat the question, Gagan. Sorry if I was unclear. I was saying that the directions call out background and antecedent checks, right? So one question was, what do you interpret? What do you make of this, right? And second, what do you believe players need to do at what frequency, etc.
I think background checks are critical part of onboarding. I think from knowing the business, and I think the whole idea is to ensure uh, more of, you can say, risk tiered approach, so that we are able to get through of the original like gray zone area. It's just more like it's more about like clearing that out intelligently. We don't, if there are any repeat offenders, how do we weed them out at the earliest. I think that is something that regulator is also looking, because people tend to come back maybe with different entities, and how do you ensure that there are gamers are not coming back in. uh, so that way it is, I think, very critical, with a combination of it just more of, you can say, automated checks around GST for legal history and blacklist and government listed entities as well. And I believe I think I had a discussion with the IDFA team as well, where there's a good great database that you guys have created for people who have maybe legal cases against them. Those kind of things will help us in weeding on setting out the, not for limiting people in our market, but maybe setting out in the right risk tier and have the right monitoring of for people depending on the severity of uh, offenses they might have been part of, or if they are putting in that gray area. So I think that is something which is very critical part of doing business. And since I think from a regulator standpoint, they're looking at how, as a PA, we need to ensure that money movement is happening in the right manner, and a lot of things are happening in the right way, as a custodian for customer money. So I think that's where the regulator is also looking us to, for PAs, we have the direct relationship with the merchant to drive in and ensure that right participants are coming into the ecosystem. So that way it is going to be very critical. But I think checks have to be done. To answer the second part, I think checks will have to be done regularly, and we can't just say fire and forget once onboarding is done. Depending on the risk profile, companies will have to take out different approaches for maybe checking in, and though regulation also calls for the same, and companies can take maybe based on the internal data transaction monitoring. Especially, I think data is something, maybe like how the transaction volume is behaving, or even the instruments are
Correct.
being used. Those are some of the indicators which will help in identifying what's, if there is something fishy happening at any entity, and that would drive for regular checks. And
Got
there's
it.
those have to be done in, as a more of a responsible partner in the ecosystem.
Yeah. Would you agree with that, Ravindra? At least my take is this is part of the regulation is a little more, if I may say, at the, I mean, the PA is free to sort of define their own
Yeah,
framework and all of that, right? It seems little more degrees of freedom. But
yeah.
would you echo that, and any other things you want to add?
No, no, I think I agree. Like, as you're saying in the beginning as well, like this is probably the part, one of the very, very few parts which is like kind of completely left open to the
True.
interpretation, and the bank has not been very prescriptive in this specific thing. I also agree with Gagan that antecedent check and like the monitoring the transaction patterns kind of go very hand in hand. Like doing the merchants risk management on ongoing basis at a lowest possible cost. I think this is the best solution. Like also like looking at their frauds, chargebacks, refund patterns, like their return to sale, and within the return to sale, like what kind of issues have caused, like items not matching, categories not matching, so and also probably I think if like since the more onus has been kept on the PAs, I believe I don't know if you recall or not, earlier the POS industry used to keep a lot of reserve amount
Correct.
for merchants from their own settlements based on their performance. I think with all this competition coming in, the reserves probably would have gone down to zero because POS players are trying to be as merchant friendly as possible. But that trend may come back because again the entire onus has been kept on the PA itself, and background check is completely PA's responsibility. So, I mean, the new patterns may emerge like for a very good merchant. You don't create reserve, but like for merchants, you are suspicious of risk. Like you may start creating reserves, of course, in agreement with the merchants as well, so that like you have negative the risk of negative merchant balance, etc., are not there. Otherwise, it's like whatever MDR a PA has accumulated in a span of say 2 3 months, just few transactions and all the kind of P&L against that merchant gets wiped out in a very short period of time, which makes the business extremely unsustainable.
True.
So yeah, this very, very important part. I think technology again here will play a very, very important role. Uh, and also ensure that like money is in the safe hands and customers' interests are completely safeguarded.
I
Got
think
it.
one point, I think what I'll just like to add back, I think Ravindra made a great point on chargebacks. I think maybe the regulator has kept it open, but with chargeback liability being with the PA, in a way it ties back with PA's responsibility because chargebacks is ultimately responsibility of PA, and at least refund would happen from the PA's account.
Correct.
They might have to recover from the customer and merchant. Customer interest is safeguarded, so it's no more of even in PA's own interest
To do
that
it
they
properly.
build more of
Correct.
risk profile more correctly and how
Correct.
which customer base they are going after.
Yeah.
No, true.
Yeah.
True. As always with the RBI, there's more thought than is put into it as than is obvious, right?
Yeah.
Anyways, so Sarge, maybe one question to you as we start wrapping up is obviously we've talked about the PA a lot, but from a merchant standpoint, right? And if you were to put yourself in their shoes, what do you think is going to change? Of course, as I think Ravindra pointed out, they might have to do KYC 5 times over. So there is, of course, some pain on their side as well, you could argue. But what do you think is going to change for them? Is it sort of going to help reduce fraud? What might be the other things that they can expect?
Uh, I think Malcolm, fundamentally the merchants on ground are quite a pampered lot.
Sarge? Yeah. Sorry, go ahead.
Yes. I was saying the merchant
Can hear you.
oh, can you hear me?
Yeah, we are able to hear you well.
Yeah, we are able to.
Okay. So I think what I was saying is the merchant on ground is a bit of a pampered lot, is what I feel. There's always a couple of PAs and a couple of sales folks knocking their doors to get onboarded, and they tend to choose the journey which they find to be the most convenient or most easiest, and they take the path of least friction. I think one big change that will happen now is the journey will be unified across all PAs. So whichever PA they are getting onboarded to, they are bound to do a few document checks. They are bound to do video KYC. They are bound to do CPV for small merchants. So they will see lesser disconnect between 2 3 PAs in terms of their journey. What the merchant I think will also see is it's not just a one-time interaction with the PA at the onboarding time. They'll see PAs coming to them repeatedly, maybe every year, every 6 months for some background checks, some location checks, things like that. So they'll interact more frequently with the PAs. And I think if I look at it from the other cohort of merchant, which is trying to game the system, trying to fraud the PAs, I think they will find it a little tougher now with clear guidelines put in place. The kind of background antecedent checks, the kind of, I mean, with the advent of tech, we all have solutions around things like shell companies. We have solutions around things like checking the robustness of merchant business. So with these solutions getting deployed, it's harder and harder every day to commit a fraud. And the third element of this ecosystem, which talks to the merchant, is the DSA, the agent, the field agent. RBI is very clear over here that those field agents also have to undergo a good scrutiny, a good background check by the PA before they can start interacting with the merchant. So that element also, helps in preventing those frauds, because collusion fraud is not very new in this system. So with DSAs and field agents being verified and scrutinized, I think the collusion fraud also is looking to come down. So to summarize, I think I'm trying to say that merchant experience gets more unified, and from a fraud angle it gets tougher by the day to game the system and to game the PS.
Got it. I think we'll now try and get some closing thoughts and then open it up for questions. So maybe I'll go in the same order as we have been, Ravindra, Gagan, and then Saharsh. So maybe just if you have to pick one thing that you want to suggest that people do, in the next, I think as we all sort of said, the December perhaps is a little more straightforward, but the time of that may be a little more challenging. But if there's one thing you would urge people to do in the next, let's say, 3 to 6 months, one critical thing from your standpoint, what advice would that be for the ecosystem? Ravindra, will start with you.
Yeah. Yeah, maybe not one, but two things that come to my mind. A is like it starts now itself. Don't wait for more to build more clarity. I think there is enough in the ecosystem available to partner and make sure that P as a PA, you're completely compliant. So starting soon is the key to make sure that we are able to comply with all these guidelines which have come, because onboarding simplification in onboarding as a differentiator is no more there. It's a very standard protocol which lot of us will have to follow. That's one. And secondly, my opening thought was also that the cost of onboarding and operational cost of maintaining a merchant is definitely going to increase dramatically. So instead of chasing the vanity metrics of millions of merchants, like it makes sense to focus on the merchants where there is a significant business case in place. And of course, not for the people in the business, but for the RBI, there is also a strong case to ensure that there is a MDR in this business for their PAs to survive as well. So that would be my closing thoughts. That start early, focus on the uh, business metrics that matter rather than chasing vanity of merchant selection. And of course, there might be a money for the PS to make in the long run by now with so much of stake in terms of cost going on.
Got it? Your thoughts, Gagan?
So I think guidelines bring in clarity around how we want to operate, and I think that is something which defines the overall ecosystem. I think also, secondly, what the regulator is also looking more for a serious players to be in there, considering the scale and uh, magnitude of things involved. And they're looking for more serious players who are looking to build out trust and convenience in the overall ecosystem. So I think for all players involved, there might be a short-term pain, which somebody might feel initially, but I think in long term it would be beneficial. Uh, but that's something maybe a quarter or two away before people start seeing that value in it.
Got it, Saharsh, your thoughts? And then we'll open it up to audience questions.
Yes, I think my closing thought is that it's an uphill task. It's not easy, but achievable. I think players like us, like Identify, also has a critical role to find creative ways of assisting the PAs to get past this initial friction. While we have spoken about things like MCC and VSEP and things like that, I think there is good amount of tech innovation that can be done to help cover the fresh merchant and the stock merchants, which is all the existing merchants to get regulated, to get KYC'd, and to clean up the entire ecosystem. So I see a partnership emerging very quickly to clean up this entire ecosystem of PAs, tech players, and the merchants.
Got it? Okay. So I think we'll take a few audience questions, and thank you to the audience who's obviously listened in patiently and shared questions. So I don't think we're going to have time for all of them. So I will pick a few. In case we picked yours, that's great. If not, we'll find a way to respond to you. But maybe I'll pick one of them that says, I think now banks sort of acquiring business, especially in the offline space, right, is now sort of squarely under these guidelines, right, for classic bank entities. So, how do you think it's going to change? Either what implications could it have for a bank? And I know sort of both of you don't represent banks, but what would you think is the implication for banks, and could it change anything in the on the competitive sort of side, right? So maybe I'll pick Gagan, you if you want to have a point of view on that.
Sure. So I think this is going to make ecosystem more. I think till now PAs have been able to do put more onus on the relationship with them, or like they had the relationship with merchant without any implication on them. and passing the overall implication to the bank, where banks would be scrambling later down on maybe when the merchant is onboarded and after a scale they find out there are certain issues with the merchant. So I think that's where now the relationship is going to be much more balanced, where PAs are also going to be equal party to the overall relationship, and they are going to do due diligence at their part as well before putting out to the bank side. Otherwise, it was more seen as like bank is not assisting. Uh, it's like more when it comes to you, then you realize the gravity of things and how important those some of those items are. So PAs will also realize the importance of these activities and would be more diligent at their end, and that would reduce the friction and also would ensure that overall ecosystem is working more hands in hand. And so there would be one more additional layer while banks would be part of the overall chain and would be liable for some of those checks, but it just helps out overall that there would be one more person who has to do this job. So overall, I think it will help us as an ecosystem and maybe bring more, you can say, equal partnership between PAs and banks. And overall, how do you look at the onboarding and relationship building with the merchant and merchant?
No,
I think
thank you. Thank you.
one
Yeah,
more
please.
point on this, like since offline was not as regulated a business, and I think probably pressure from the government also because the expansion and this regulation have to go hand in hand at the same time. Now, I think banks will also have to get into the space where they are doing robust transaction monitoring, assessing the frauds, any kind of AML risk are there. They are like completely under the ambit of that. So probably they may end up investing far more on those side of things as well in terms of entire risk management. While in offline, it was not as stringent like that of online so far. So I think that angle probably may change as well. Uh, and of course, now in terms of the funds, it comes via escrow versus the current accounts being used earlier. That may not impact banks as such, but it definitely impacts PAs. Not sure if it impacts banks that much. So
So
that's
I think
also an
I think while just could like what Saraj was saying earlier, like I think merchants were being booed by five different PAs. It was more like a dating scene. Now it would be more of a serious relationship between all involved, and so that will ensure that everybody is taking their part of activity more seriously and how monitoring has to be done.
yeah.
And the growth phase is over from like I think not over in that sense, but at least the multifold growth that we were seeing from there, it is going to be more of how do we ensure that systems are stable and sustainable.
Yeah. Ravindra, I'll pick one more question. Maybe I'll address it to you, and of course, others feel free to add.
Yeah.
There's a few questions around CKYC, right? Saying, is it mandatory? Is it the first port of call, in some sense? And a few other sort of link things. But maybe if you have a view, would be great to clarify it.
Got it. So the question is like, is CKYC mandatory or like how things go hand in hand with
Yeah,
CKYC? Like, do we need to
and
do
that, and is it
video
is it like the
customer?
first port? Is
Sorry.
it like is the do you try? Is it the first port of call? Do you do that first? Is that the default, and then you try other things?
Got it. Maybe Saharsh can also add on exact process that we are going to follow. But as far as my understanding goes, yes, CKYC has to be pursued for that specific merchant. And then after CKYC has been pursued, and if the documents are available, then merchants need to give consent that yes, these documents are correct in nature. But rest of the verification that needs to be done for merchant, be it VSIP, which is Video Customer Identification Procedure, like VSIP, or the in-person digital KYC, like someone, FOS street agent. FOS agent is like collecting document physically, is verifying the document physically, has to be pursued as well in addition to this. So CKYC at best like is acting that you don't need to submit the document
Document.
and it is directly picked, but rest of the process needs to be completely followed so that it's a complete verification of the merchant.
So it is in some sense the first port of call. If that doesn't work, then you explore other things, right? Is that fair to say?
It that no, even if it works, then also the rest of the process needs
Correct.
to be followed, right?
True. Very much.
Yeah.
But it
Yeah.
is your it is like that's where you kind of start, right? it's a starting
Correct.
point in
That's
terms.
where you start. That's the first call. That's what you're right. If it works,
But
doesn't work, and then followed by that, there is a decision
correct.
tree basis that you need to need to follow that
Interesting.
process.
Got it. Anything you want to add quickly, Sarge, or we have probably have time for one more question?
No, I think Ravindra has covered it on CKYC largely, so we can take one more question.
Perfect. So I think I want to go back to this part where we explored at the end to say that due diligence and the monitoring is a little bit more, and I think Ravindra, you characterize it saying open-ended, right? So maybe if maybe the question specifically is now if you have to reevaluate merchants, and at a certain frequency, which I think everybody will have their risk frameworks and using transaction data, not using data, and looking at various signals, use of analytics, etc. I'm sure there will be some cohorts created, right? Now, when you think about reevaluating merchants, do you have to actually go back and validate them vis-a-vis sort of the initial risk parameters, or how do you sort of think about this whole reassessment, reevaluation process? And again, Ravindra, maybe start with you, and Gagan would love to hear your thoughts as well.
Reassessment, like I think for now, irrespective the type of merchant you are, like for all the merchants, existing merchants onboarded before 31st December have to be reassessed, re-onboarded by September 2026. That is clear. I think after that, there is a clear mandate which was part of the draft guidelines as well. Basis the type of merchant we have to do reassessment within a period of 2 years time frame or within a period of 5 years time frame. I'm not exactly recalling the what were the specifics like, but that's the protocol which will have to be followed. And in addition to that, like any discrepancy on MCC or any discrepancy on, say, again, like in the MCC, like what was quoted versus what is not being shown in the transaction patterns. Say you are a grocery merchant, but all your transactions are rupees more than 10,000 or more. So that there's a clear disconnect in that. So I think those reassessments have to be done periodically by the various PAs as well. So yeah, that's where my thoughts are in terms of the reassessment. Gagan, please feel free to add as well.
Yeah, it's covered it well. I think one part of guideline it says is more of onboarding based reassessment and onboarding at risk that you have assigned for a particular merchant. Those are defined, but beyond that, obviously transactional risk basis monitoring will be triggered time to time, and that would reclassify the risk of a merchant. It can go from high, like from low to high, and based on that, then further scrutiny would keep on happening. And I think it would not be a one-time activity where we like just at the time of onboarding,
Mm.
but it would just re-happen basis the transactional data time to time basis for
Yeah.
all the merchants.
Wonderful. No, thank you. I think we've taken three of the questions, and I'm sure that there are definitely a few more. And like I said, we run out of time, unfortunately. So we will take these up. We'll get, we'll obviously get Ravindra and Gagan's thought on those, and happy to circulate it to the participants offline. But just being conscious of time, I think we will wrap up here. I just wanted to say thank you to Ravindra and Gagan both again for taking the time out and joining us. At least I found it very enriching. I think as usual,
Bring after 3:30, it has timed out. Yeah,
Internet reads time better than
yeah.
Zoom. Apurva, if you can hear us, I think Malcolm is also
you called it out. Time to act is right now. So thank you for sharing these thoughts. I've tried to sort of do a quick summary. And like I said, we'll get back to the rest of you with some of the questions that remain unanswered. So with that, we'll wrap up, and we'll be in touch. And as Sash mentioned, we love to partner with folks in the ecosystem on this journey. But thank you again, Ravindra and Gagan, for sharing your thoughts, and Sash as well. We will wrap up with this. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you very much for
Yes.
inviting us.
Thank you for
Thank
having
you.
us.
Thank you so much, everyone. Very nice discussion. Thank you.
Thank you, Ravindra. Thank you, Gagan. Bye.
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 Thank you.